G'day, it's Murray Lorden here from MUZBOZ Games. I just wanted to cover a bit more of my level design process here. So I've begun to block out a terrain and a space here that's nice and flat to build on. So this is probably not going to be my final terrain for the game, but to begin building a prototype of Secret Keep, I really needed to just have a space to work in, to bring in the player character, to start making sounds for their movement, their footsteps, to start implementing their abilities, to bring in AI characters, guards and various NPCs to fill the story. So to do that, I kept sort of toing and froing about when do I get started. You know, I need to maybe plot out the perfect test space to create the perfect, and then I found myself going, well, I need a scenario. You know, what's going to be the puzzle that I use as my test, and I sort of just ended up getting a bit overwhelmed by different questions that I needed answers to, and as is the case with game development, in so many ways, there were sort of interdependent questions and answers where answering one question needed the answer of another question done first. So I thought, okay, I just need to build an island, rough it out, get something basic happening where I can start building some architecture, building this castle, building my keep on an island, and just start working on the systems. And then, you know, I might keep some of it or I might just throw it all away. So here I just started to shape the terrain. I've actually already had a prior project where I was working on a procedural terrain generation system. So I actually used that to get started here. I procedurally generated a bunch of terrains where it sort of randomizes the shapes of the terrain, makes some mountains and peaks, and I've got various different sort of styles of islands I can make, whether they're jungles or sort of more lower level islands, ones with pine trees, ones with palm trees and different things. So I just generated a bunch and sort of chose one that I felt was about the right size to put my castle on, and I thought I'll start with that because my algorithm actually sort of puts some basic textures down on the terrain based on the height and steepness of different areas. So you'll see it's got those sort of rocky cliffs on the steep bits, and sand down near the ocean, and grass up above the ocean on flatter areas, and things like that. So I thought I'll use that as my starting point, and then here what I've done is I wanted to put the castle on its own little sort of part of the island surrounded by a moat. So here I'm just testing. I've got my ocean at a level of I think 40 units, and so here I'm just making a little moat around the island, I guess as if it were maybe a natural moat or maybe one that they've built. And so here my goal isn't necessarily to make the perfect layout, but I did want to sort of make one that's kind of representative of the type of size and feel of my castle. And so the idea here is that it's not going to be a huge keep. Here what I'm doing on the screen is actually just making it so the trees aren't on such a slope that they sort of stick out. I find some of these terrain editing tools in Unity a bit awkward, partly because I haven't used them a heap, but partly just because the brushes, the different tools all use the same brush size and opacity setting, and that's pretty awkward when you're trying to go back and forth between raise and lower and smooth tools, for example. You want different brush sizes and settings on them, and it doesn't store them for you between tools. This video is sped up 4 times, by the way, so just as a reference for how long I was tinkering away on some of these things. So here I decided to put in a blue plane to represent the ocean because I'm using Ceto Ocean, which is an ocean that I really like and a system I've used on a project or two. So I think I'll use Ceto Ocean, but you can only see it at runtime. It actually generates at runtime. So I just wanted to put in an ocean so that I could work on the terrain and I knew roughly where the ocean level would be without having to press play. Now, once I'd done that, I just went around and cleaned up a bit, deleting like rocks and things that were sitting out in the ocean, or trees. And so here you can see that little bit on its own is where the castle keep's going to be, and the rest of the terrain is really just there as extra set dressing at the moment. So by the time I'd actually finished building my little castle wall shape, I thought maybe the area could be a bit bigger. So, you know, this is the sort of reason why I'm just doing a fairly quick kind of block out, is just to get a bit of a feel through sort of, I guess, the first test run as to how I feel, how big the space should be. Now here I've got a whole lot of different assets in my project of different like mostly free assets, a few assets I've bought and stuff, and I was just sort of here, I had a few different bridges, and I tried one out and it didn't really work, and then I tried this one, and this one felt like a better fit where I could shove the terrain up a bit and make that feel like it was about right. Yep, so I'm just sculpting the terrain up there to meet the bridge. So yeah, it can be difficult to sculpt the terrain in situations like this, I find, where you're sort of pulling and tugging away at this lower bit and the higher bit. But, you know, I need to practice up my terrain editing skills, so as I go I'll probably figure out some better ways of dealing with some of these situations. It'd be nice to be able to sculpt with a Wacom pen and have a little bit more of a ZBrush-like experience that's sort of a bit more pressure sensitive. I do find it a bit tricky doing this with a mouse and you're sort of rubbing over the terrain to get it. You know, sometimes it feels like the intensity of the brush is too strong, sometimes it feels like it's too little, and it's sort of, if you had a pressure sensitive pen, sort of feels like you could just get a bit more of a intuitive, organic flow going with it. I decided to join this bit through to the other area here, just so the player could explore a bit further around the island, partly just so that I could test out some more different areas of the island. Like I wanted to build a path texture along here and have that go somewhere, and you know, I could just experiment with a few different areas on the island as I go, with maybe some different like atmospheres and things. I decided to grab a few different textures to use in the game, so I just got some different dirts to try out as paths. This one's a bit more of a sort of a rocky dirt. Got a bit more of a pockmarked dirt here. I need to actually build some terrain layers, they're called in Unity, which are sort of little textures, like a material, I guess like a terrain material, and get some more fully fleshed out ones that have the albedo map but also a normal map, and I think you can have roughness on it as well, which will affect sort of how reflective and shiny, I guess how reflective different parts of it are. So if you had a texture that was dirts and rocks, then the rock bit might be a little more reflective than the dirt, for example, or things like that. Or if you had a little wet patch, then it would be highly reflective. So here I'm just duplicating some of the terrain layers I've already got. I've only got a few basic ones in there at the moment, and so I'm just making these into terrain layer materials. The new pock dirt and rocky dirt and things like that. Just adding them into the terrain as usable terrain materials, and painting on my dirt. Now this process actually ended up taking a while because I started off with a fairly low resolution control texture for my splat maps, or my terrain textures. That was because while I was using my procedural terrain generator, I had it set to quite a low, you can actually see it there. See, I had it set on about, I think, 32 by 32. It was a very spread out control texture because I actually wanted my quite sort of low res textures to just blend evenly over the terrain. But as I started to paint, I realized I needed to up that way up to like 512, or I think I actually went up to 1024, and even wondered whether I should take it higher, so that I could paint with a lot more detail. I actually hadn't done hand painting on the terrain for a long time. I'd been doing this procedural terrain generation project for a long time. So yeah, as I started to kind of paint it out, when you upscale the control texture, it sort of does it for you, but not very well. You can see all the faint sort of colors there are actually parts of the terrain that don't really have proper weighting of the textures painted on. So I went over it. I think here by this point I've set it to 1024 and gone, yeah, I'll try that for now. And then I had to sort of go over it all by hand and apply all the materials again, basically. And I just did a quick job of it, and it took me a while. So yep, I just went through, but it was kind of good to just get a feel of I guess just getting the textures put on there and getting a feel for sort of how I wanted them to blend and things. I'm not sure how far I'll take the texturing of this particular environment, seeing as it may just be a test, but I think I'll try to pretty it up because I'm still trying to figure out what style to go for with this game, you know, whether it's actually maybe I should go for a more low poly sort of a feel, or here I'm using some more photo texture kind of look, which might not be a good idea. You know, it might be hard to make my whole game look high fidelity, so I might be better off just steering right away from high fidelity and going for a much more flat color look, or even, you know, I was thinking of making the whole game in a sort of an EGA 16 color kind of style, like from the old late 80s games, and just choosing like my watercolor palette set of 12 colors and just using that for everything on the environment and the architecture, on characters, and just making it all sort of low poly, which could be nice. But I do have some asset packs of like villages and various creatures and things that I thought I might do prototyping with them, seeing as I've already got those characters and they could be used quite well to sort of test out my AI behaviors and put characters quickly in the game just by using these existing, like you know, townswomen, townsmen, different people. I can just plonk them in and go, well, let me try a story idea with this character, or let me try to put some, you know, stealth detection on this particular character, and I'll see if I can sneak around them. And that means that I don't have to like go and build a character in Maya, which I'm not particularly good at. You know, the art side of thing, especially like character modeling and texturing and animation is, you know, probably really some of the hardest stuff to do in games. So I thought I'll probably just use my asset packs that I've got. So maybe I'll just go with a kind of a, you know, a 90s or 2000 style, not photorealistic, but sort of photo texture based terrain, and put these sort of characters in that I've got that are I guess I'd call them 90s or 2000s kind of style, you know, sort of mid-fidelity characters. So I thought I'd just do that for now. You can see here I'm just going over the whole terrain and sort of getting my textures applied to it. So yeah, maybe I'll skip a bit here. So yeah, I spent an hour or two or something hand painting, or sort of just tweaking this up. I probably could have like potentially generated, like if I had the control texture at the higher 1024 texture when I generated it, it would have saved some of this time, but then I would have had to go over, I think, and like it would have come out quite mechanically and sort of with harsh lines using my algorithm, so I would have had to fiddle around and sort of make it a bit more organic anyway. So I didn't mind doing this, and also like you can listen to some music or watch some Netflix or something on the other screen while you're doing it, so it's sort of a therapeutic activity. But yeah, I you know, also you know, it doesn't look highly detailed or whatever here. It's sort of just broad strokes here, but that's fine. You know, you've kind of got to start somewhere, so I just sort of started painting and thought I'll just do a rough block out, and I'll do a little bit of work, sort of like what I'm doing here on screen, you know, making it a little bit more organic and smudgifying things out a bit, but I can come back through and sort of touch that up later and add more detail and come in with different sorts of plants and grasses and trees and things, and add some more terrain texture later. I thought I'll just do I'll just make the whole thing roughly consistent with broad brush strokes for now. And it did take a while because the island's probably bigger than it needs to be. But I just wanted a bit of a space to work around to, I guess, highlight what's working, what's not working, and also just to see as I start to build the playable space, even though it's only small and on one part of the island, what problems occur. Like sometimes often I'll get this sort of shadow flickering the more that you make the world large. I think it's probably a floating point inaccuracy issue in Unity's like lighting or the shadows, but it might be something else. So I thought I'll just try to reveal any of those little quirks that are going to come up so that I can deal with them and see how big of an issue they are or what the solution to the problem is. Here I'm just going around cleaning up. When I do my terrain generation, it also drops these little colored POI or points of interest on the world for if there's like a randomized food spot or a water drinking spot or different little points that the AI use. And it also dots creatures around the terrain. So I'm just deleting the ones where I've done some terraforming and then now it's like hanging in the air or in the wrong spot. So I'm just deleting those, shifting some rocks around and stuff for where I've they got generated by code and now they're hanging around in the wrong spot. I also added some trees manually just to tweak up, like removing the ones that are on the path. I'm just updating the nav mesh there based on my terraforming as well. I still need to go through and I think I need to use a nav mesh area to tell it like I only want the nav mesh to generate above sea level and not below sea level, but I'm going to do that later. It shouldn't be a big deal. I've just spotted my bridge hanging in the air there. Patch that up. Just getting a bit of a little fly around and a feel for it. So there's my little castle area on the right there on that plateau. So yeah, I thought I'd done a decent little first pass, so I thought I'd just jump into play mode and have a little bit of a run around. I discovered that bridge was a little high, and I think I just popped it into the ground a little further. I also had an issue where I'd forgotten to make it so that this like placeholder blue water plane, it's still there when I hit play, so I just quickly wrote some code, a little script that just deletes that on play mode. It's sort of a little quick example of why like I've really decided to become a programmer. Like, I guess I got into making games as a level designer, making maps for games like Quake and Thief and stuff. But as I worked in the industry over the years and, you know, had various attempts or dreams at wanting to make my own things, as I kept trying to make games, I just realized that I need to be able to do my own programming if I really want to be able to, like, develop a game far enough to even really convince other people that they should jump on board and want to make a game with me, or you know, or maybe I can just make entire games by myself or whatever. But yeah, even just being able to whip open a script and throw it on that thing and go, yep, when it plays, the placeholder ocean plane deletes itself. But that goes right down to, like, I guess part of my theory about it is that you know, if you're going to write poems or be a writer, then you do the writing. You know, you don't tell someone else you've got a cool idea and, you know, get them to write it. You know, in a way, if you want to be a master of writing, then you learn all about words and you learn all about writing and you do the writing. So, you know, it's certainly not the only way to make games. It makes sense to team up with people with different skills and all leverage each other's skills. But I also am of the mind, partly because I'm interested in it, that it can be cool to learn every facet, including programming, which is certainly the heart of what makes a computer game, and get right into that and understand that yourself, so that, you know, you can design games and think about solutions to systems on that level of, like, well, how would you actually program it? I think the more I learn about programming too, I feel like I could come up with some pretty interesting systems for how, you know, AIs work, or how a game narrative might be dynamic or something. based around ideas of how you would structure that in code. So anyway, I'm partly just justifying my own approach, I guess, for doing the programming myself as well as everything else. Not necessarily what I want to do in the long term. I would like to jam out games with a team. Now, what's happening on the screen at the moment is I'm basically using Real-Time CSG for the first time. And Real-Time CSG is a free package that you can get for Unity now, and the developer of it is actually, he works for Unity, and he's working on a new editor as well called Chisel, which will probably be even cooler. But yeah, I'm just trying to get my head around how to use it, how to structure these real-time CSG objects. And the beauty of them is that you can actually basically model inside Unity. And this is how a game like Thief actually used to work. You would use real-time CSG brushes to basically define positive space and negative space. So here I've added a negative cutout subtractive object to a positive additive wall. So I'm making an archway in a wall, and I'm basically just trying to copy that object next to it. Here I'm struggling to like figure out how you're meant to divide an edge in half to make a peak. Some of the controls are not as intuitive or laid out quite as I would have thought they are, and I'm still kind of getting used to it. But I think that once I get a bit faster and more at home with this tool, I can see it being a really cool way to build a level where at any time you can come back in and cut a new window in a wall, or shift the window over to the left or over to the right. It literally is like a real-time editing in the editor system. I'm totally struggling with it here on the screen, and I was not finding it that intuitive in some ways, but this is literally like the first I did build a quick thing with it a few months ago, but this is really the first time I've really properly gone, okay, I'm going to start building objects for my game with it. So it seems cool though overall, despite me being a little bit confused by which buttons to press when. I've read the whole manual for it, but yeah, I might make a tutorial for it if I can get my head around enough of the workflow that I feel like I could offer a useful tutorial on it. We shall see. So I've started to get the hang of it. Now here I'm drawing a little shape on the side. I want to create that cutaway sort of shape so that the top of the tower has a bit of a sticking out kind of walkway to it. So I build the shape on the side, extend the shape through, make it subtractive. So that seems to be working. I do find that I have to pull the subtractive shape right out further past the edge to actually delete that surface, which I think I found that a little counterintuitive, but it seems to work okay. So I think that's I think I'm doing the right thing. Copied the shape there over to the other side, and you can see I'm sort of starting to get the hang of this tool. So I copied that wall with the gate and made another wall and pulled the gate out. So I'm making that a prefab and just copying that, using the grid snapping to snap it all together. Seems to be working okay. So I wanted to wall off this area with a gate, with a wall, and have that, like, I guess my goal is to build a fairly realistic feeling environment. The game's designed to be in the sort of immersive sim type of genre, like Thief, The Dark Project, or Dishonored or something. So I'm going for a feel where, if there's a wall, then the wall should be somewhere that makes sense. The player shouldn't easily be able to just get over the wall. It's an impediment to the player, and they need to think creatively how to use their tool set or their verbs to get over the wall, get through the wall. Is there maybe a secret way in somewhere, or do you just need to go through the front gate? If you need to go through the front gate, then perhaps the guards maybe are looking for you, so you're gonna have to look for the right time to go through. Or do you want to slip through the gate at night time, etc., etc. Or maybe the gate's closed. Is there a way to get through the closed gate? So I guess my focus for my test space is to just build a believable space in the kind of vibe that I want for the game, which is like medieval, probably either no magic or low magic type of a world, so fairly grounded and based around whether people can see you in the light and the dark and things like that, with a bit of a fantastical vibe, I guess, but I kind of want to focus the story and the world on intrigue and character interplay and stuff. So I want to build the space like this little castle space, not build it too large at the moment. I don't want it to be some sprawling city. I want it to be sort of intimate, so yep, I'm creating this walled off space where I will then later build this keep, or like a whole sort of castle with a keep in it. And I'll probably start by writing some sort of guard AI. What your relationship with the guards will actually end up being, I'm not sure. Like, I'm thinking you live in the castle, so you're actually friends with the guards. You're all on the same team, effectively. But the game, I'm thinking the setting will be something like there's a festival or a wedding or some sort of celebration or some sort of event going on, and you're helping make it happen, and the guards are there doing their thing too. But there'll be visitors to the town, so perhaps some other noble family and their entourage. They may also have guards, etc. And some force could even try to take over the castle at some point, which you can maybe try to stop. Or if that were to eventuate, then you would be avoiding their guard AI, whether they're some strange creature or they're literally guards with a different uniform on or what. So you can see there, that's sort of what I end up going for with the overall sort of size and shape of these walls. For this particular bunch of blocking out that I did, I basically just only got around this far. I set up the sort of wall space. I do a bunch of stuff here, like where I'm just creating little sort of joiner bits that just join these up so you can't sneak between the gaps. I just do that in a pretty rough way. So again, just experimenting with these real-time CSG tools and sort of seeing how they work and seeing how quick. I sort of want to use these tools as a quick block-out system where I can basically sort of build anything that I need in terms of the architecture and buildings and things. But later on, I can either replace them with a custom-made model, or I can just refine them with real-time CSG and add some detail, like add a little nick in the wall where like a brick's fallen out, or anything I want really. I could add more detail to like add little trims and details along the bottom of a wall or the top of a wall, or just decorate it further by adding paintings or furniture or whatever. So I'm pretty happy with real-time CSG so far. Just building these walls was pretty cool, fairly straightforward, especially once I sort of figured out the basics of the tool. And I was able to add those little buttresses and the walkways, and I can still, they're like prefab objects, so I could go along and update one bit of wall by maybe changing the shape of a buttress or something, and then update the prefab, and that would apply to all of them. Or I could go along and make a little broken bit of one of them or something, and you can sneak in that way. If you come up around the back of the wall and you get on top of a rock, and then you're like, oh, there's a bit of the tower, bit of the wall broken off there, and I can actually jump up in there that way or something, so you can go and specialize maybe just one wall section or something. And here I've sort of finished building my wall, so I've updated the nav mesh, and you can see that it's shaped itself nicely around the outside of the wall, and it's also created a nav mesh on the bridge and along the top of the wall. So I still need to go in and start building some actual shape. There's with the ocean on. Now I've jumped down as the player here, and I'm just having a bit of a look around at a sort of sense of the scope of it and stuff. Ah yes, I've changed the time of day to sort of dawn. There's a little torch and a candle I might use at some point. To dawn. This is a bit too early in the morning here. The sun hasn't even come over the hill, but I'm thinking of going one thing I'm thinking of doing is setting the game at a few specific times of day. So I'm thinking maybe you wake up in the morning and maybe the sun, it could even be quite early dawn like it is now, or it could be a little later in the day, like even just half an hour later, so the sun's just up a bit more. And certain things happen in the morning, and then once the story kind of resolves past that morning situation or scene, perhaps it it would fade out and then fade back in, and now it's midday, and then there's sort of Act 2 at midday, and then once Act 2 occurs in whatever, like any number of different sort of events and outcomes could happen in Act 2. Maybe you overcome some things and get the story going in a good path, or maybe bad things happen and it's like, ooh, trouble's escalating, and then that act would finish, fade out, fade in, and you'd be maybe at night time, and maybe like a storm is happening at night time, and things are escalating inside the castle, and it's raining and stuff, sort of build the tension. And maybe there's a final act which is like midnight and it's pitch dark and there's like a lightning storm outside and there's lightning like flashing in the windows and stuff. That is a thought that I was having, just tweaking the shadow settings here so that the light doesn't come through there. Change the normal bias, seems to fix it. Here's me popping textures on the walls as well. Just got a basic sort of stone texture happening, which was a bit weird. It would not apply properly until I think I rebuilt the... Anyway, got there in the end. So yeah, I'm wondering whether to go with sort of a fixed time step sort of story, so you got the morning, midday, night and midnight, or whether there's a slow time of day update in real time, like all day. So maybe it starts off in the morning and it's like you've got 4 hours to do a playthrough, and over 4 hours maybe time goes like 4 or 8 or 10 times faster than normal. So maybe a day, instead of being say 24 hours, actually goes for 3 or 4 hours, and over that time it goes from morning to midday to night to midnight or something. And if you just stand still in the middle of the town or up on the hill or something, then you might find that the story progresses in a certain way, and there's sort of a dominant faction or story happening, and you need to intervene if you want the story to take some other path. And as soon as you sort of it's a little bit like the butterfly flapping its wings theory of, if you go and intervene in one way, like say assassinating someone or something, then the story could unfold quite differently, in that if you go and kill the dominant threat in the storyline, depending on how you see that dominant threat being, I guess that depends on who you want to align yourself with in the overall story. But say you're expected to side with the royal family who live in this castle, and you're there to help defend them and stop bad things happening, then someone might come into town for this festival or event, and you find out by overhearing them that they want to assassinate someone in the royal family. Then if you do nothing, that will happen. That's bad, and that's sort of how the story plays out. But if you intervene and foil this plot against the royal family, then other things can open up and become possible and happen. Now these may be other things you don't want to happen, so then you'd have to go and tackle those things. So I'm keen to explore the idea of having a somewhat definite story to tell, but that the player is then an agent in that story as well. So it's kind of like dropping you down into the middle of a play, and you are going to ultimately potentially turn it from a tragedy into a heroic story where you've saved the day, or I obviously need to explore these ideas further. I don't know whether I would let the player become a villain and ensure the demise of the castle. I think the idea of doing that sort of thing is cool, where maybe I would come down ultimately as the author of the story and say, you have achieved a certain ending to the story, and you have observed it right now by playing it out. and I don't know how I would necessarily acknowledge those things, whether there'd be different achievements, and it's like there's an achievement for actually getting the really terrible, like evil kind of ending, and there's an achievement for getting the heroic ending, and you sort of label them that way for the player to experiment with. That sort of thing could work, or whether I go more of a route of sort of bringing up a game over screen and saying, oh, like things have gotten too out of control, and you know, this is the end of the line for you, you should try again, and sort of come down a little bit more, I guess, with a specific sort of moral to the tale, and effectively like game over the player if they're not, you know, if they've failed in some way. That's all stuff I need to figure out, but that's the sort of realm I want to play around with for the game. So here I'm just chucking a few boxes in the level for different like parts of the blockout, like a keep or a tower or a servant's quarters. I ended up just removing them. They were a bit sort of distracting, so I just chucked a few towers in quickly to get a sense of sort of scale and whatever. But I need to the next step of this blockout will be to actually, like, now I'm actually ready to jump in here and go, okay, I'm going to build some architecture with real-time CSG and build like the keep and a stairwell, and there's the great hall and there's the kitchen, etc. So here's me running around, just having a look. I'm still in 4 times fast forward. This is a sense of the place, probably at 6:30 or so in the morning. There's the sun. I've got a couple of little torches there just to get a bit of a sense of light. I think that material looked a little glossy, so I went and fiddled with this texture to make it smoother, get rid of that shine. Here we go again. So yeah, this is pretty good for now. I'm happy with this. I've just got a basic terrain. It's not hyper detailed or anything, but it'll do. You can actually swim around. I've got the bridge. You can go over the bridge. Got some little torches there. And so what I'll probably do at first is build a space, and maybe even build it at night time, so I've got a nice dark environment, and then light it with torches, and start experimenting with a more refined player controller and some actual like AIs. I think I'll probably just put guards in, and I'll probably build what is basically, I've also got a boat in my prototype terrain generator here, so I'm just mucking around in my boat. I'll probably make what is basically like a little homage to kind of Thief level, Thief the Dark project. So I'll probably build a small area of the castle and then make it so the player has to like get up to level 3 and steal the scepter or something, and just have these guards that are like patrolling and getting in your way. So that'll be the next step. Catch you later.